Good afternoon, everyone. So I was on a live earlier on today with the wonderful Nikki from Make Birth Better, Nicole, a researcher, and Dr. Claire Feely, who is leading the BEST study, which is the Birth Experience Study UK. And we touched on intergenerational trauma. Many of you know I tend to talk about this a lot, but I had an interesting question pop up in my inbox following that, when I spoke on the impact of intergenerational trauma on descendants of colonisers and those that have done harm in the past. So I wanted to just touch on a few points from that. So the first being that there are four main impacts that we see when we're talking about the impact of intergenerational trauma and how it manifests and what sort of transmission, etc. So the first one is the psychological and emotional impact that it has, and that will include things like inherent guilt and shame, cognitive dissonance, so when people start to engage in work or conversations or addressing bias, this can then bring up cognitive dissonance, and also disconnection from their current or previous identity. And that could be their identity within their family, within their lineage, within their culture, etc. So the next area of impact is the social and cultural impact that it has. And that can include things like moral responsibility and the interpersonal tensions that they may experience when they are engaging with or forming relationships with those that are descendants on the other side of the spectrum. For example, if it was around the issues of enslavement, it could be as a descendant of a slave master trying to develop a new or existing relationship with a person from a family that has been enslaved. It may cause tensions, and it can also highlight the privilege and the discomforts that are associated with navigating that. And we also like to look at the transmission of trauma through generations. That's a very key aspect, and that can highlight some unresolved traumas, as well as any internalized superiority or inferiority. It can go both ways. And then lastly, addressing perpetrator trauma. So addressing perpetrator trauma can include acknowledgement and engagement, and that can be with individuals, or it can be on a grander scale where you're engaging with communities. And this is not then to substitute that with a saviour complex, but it is to help aid with learning and engagement, and then working to build and support these relationships to make a wider impact on the whole community. Also, engaging in reparative practices is really important, and that can also help with the healing of subsequent generations. And lastly, therapeutic interventions. Now, there is no denying that this is something that I feel very strongly about. I believe that therapy needs to be more mainstream, more accessible. However, when we're looking at intergenerational trauma, there's very limited support to navigate your identity and all of these things that I've mentioned before this, because not all practitioners are fully informed, but also on various ends of the spectrum and how that works with their own bias. So looking at therapeutic interventions, yes, is very important, but it needs to be done safely and effectively. If you'd like to learn a bit more about this and engage more in the topic of intergenerational trauma as a whole, then please do get in contact. There's lots of resources and training that I'm preparing in the background, hoping to launch in the new year. So please do get in contact and follow along for more snippets. Thanks.